Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. These are the headlines. The US carries out a 12th night of strikes on Iran, while Yemen's Houthis say they've hit targets in the Red Sea. The US and Saudi Arabia signs its long-awaited civil nuclear agreement, despite opposition from some lawmakers. And Germany's Chancellor Merz urges Armenia for further progress in peace talks with Azerbaijan. There's been a 12th night of US military strikes on Iran, with 2 people reported killed, while Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen say they've hit targets in the Red Sea. Here's more.
The US Central Command says American forces launched a 12th consecutive night of strikes against Iran. CENTCOM says the operation targeted Iran's maritime capabilities, missile and drone storage facilities, coastal surveillance sites, and air defense systems. US President Donald Trump said Iran is not ready to make a deal. Speaking at a campaign rally in Marietta, Georgia, ahead of the 2026 US midterm elections, Trump said Tehran was getting hit hard.
And the stock market has said, and that's with this skirmish we have going on. I call it a skirmish. This is with this skirmish we have with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I call it that because, let me tell you, they're getting hit so hard. And they want to make a deal. But I say they're not ready to make a deal. Because every time they make a deal, they want to change it and everything. They're not ready. They'll be ready very soon.
He also renewed his threat to strike Iranian infrastructure, saying the United States would target a bridge or power plant every time Tehran attacks a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Foreign Minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, said Iran's defense doctrine is eye for an eye. He warned that any aggression against Iran, including attacks on its infrastructure, would bring a powerful response, and that any country supporting such action would also be considered a legitimate target. Iran also said it carried out retaliatory drone strikes on US bases in Jordan and Bahrain, targeting troop facilities, equipment depots, and aircraft maintenance hangars. Early Thursday, the Iran-backed group the Houthis said they targeted 2 Saudi oil tankers, and maritime security reports said the Saudi flag tanker was hit in the Red Sea. Ship tracking data shows at least 7 oil tankers have reversed course near Yemen since the Houthis announced a maritime embargo on Saudi Arabia on Monday.
The fallout from these maritime threats is already drawing a sharp response from Washington. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Iran has manipulated the rebel group into targeting Saudi shipping, a move he warns could even drag China into the conflict.
You know, the Houthis largely were smart and stayed out of all this throughout the conflict, but they now apparently have gotten themselves suckered into this, going after Saudi Arabia and their ships. And by the way, that's, you know, I was reading reports a few hours ago that there is actually a Saudi fuel ship that's flagged Chinese. It's a Chinese ship. Are they going to blow up the Chinese ship? Then this becomes a problem for China. This will become a problem for the whole world. But I hope that will de-escalate, because I think the Houthis, frankly, got snookered into this thing by the Iranians, and they were smart to stay out of it, and they should stay out of it, and they should stop.
The US House of Representatives has narrowly approved a record $1.15 trillion defense bill, despite deep divisions in Washington over military spending. Republicans say the funding is needed to support US operations, including the war in Iran, strengthen defense capabilities, and improve pay and housing for service members. Democrats, however, argue the bill comes at a time when social programs are facing spending cuts, and have also raised concerns about the ongoing conflict with Iran and a provision in the bill to deepen ties between the Pentagon and Israel. The US and Saudi Arabia have signed a long-awaited civil nuclear agreement after years of negotiations. The deal is described as a peaceful agreement, but it's facing opposition in Congress over claims that it risks nuclear proliferation in an already unstable region.
A long-awaited civil nuclear agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia is now heading to Congress after being signed by senior officials from both countries. The pact allows the kingdom to build nuclear reactors using American technology, while also permitting Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium and reprocess nuclear waste, activities critics say are potential pathways to developing a nuclear weapon. US Secretary of Energy Chris Wright and Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman signed the agreement, known as a 1-2-3 agreement, alongside a bilateral safeguards accord. The US Energy Department says the deal complies with the non-proliferation requirements of the US Atomic Energy Act, describing them as among the world's strongest. However, unlike a proposal pursued during the Biden administration, the agreement does not include an additional protocol allowing the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency to carry out intrusive snap inspections. The agreement now goes before Congress. Lawmakers have 90 session days to object, although overriding a presidential veto would require a 2/3 majority. Some nuclear experts and Democratic lawmakers are urging Congress to reject or amend the deal, warning it could increase the risk of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East. The agreement is expected to support the construction of AP1000 reactors over about 30 years in a project worth tens of billions of dollars, benefiting Westinghouse. An industry source says feasibility studies and the pace of nuclear development mean it could still take years before the necessary infrastructure is in place.
Iran has rejected US claims that it's operating a secret nuclear facility at what's known as Pickaxe Mountain. The comment comes after President Donald Trump threatened military action against the site. Tehran says its nuclear program is fully declared to the International Atomic Energy Agency and calls the accusation a fabricated pretext for aggression. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai also criticized the United Nations nuclear watchdog's chief for not condemning the US threat, saying Iran would respond to any violation of its sovereignty or national security. And joining me now is Enrique Cosero, political analyst, joining us from Madrid, Spain. Enrique, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, even though there's less active fighting between the US and Iran, President Trump has warned now he would strike critical Iranian infrastructure if shipping in the Strait of Hormuz comes under threat. Does this suggest the ceasefire remains conditional now rather than stable? What's your assessment?
We're witnesses of 11 straight nights with attacks. So what I can say about this situation is that it's mainly lead by, I don't want to say chaos, but action reaction, which means that it's so difficult. It's quite difficult to make an assessment about what's going to happen next. I think the critical variable in here is that the United States, they don't know who are fighting against, and I don't mean, of course, there is Iran, without a doubt, but we don't know who controls what in Iran. And that's the main trouble in the United States. We heard before President Donald Trump saying that they're anxious for negotiate. They're anxious to negotiate. But I will bet all my fortune in saying that probably the guys who are in the negotiations are not going to be the same guys that are controlling the attacks. So that unlinked situation between who's negotiating and who is in command of the army and of the armed force is the main reason that we are facing this chaotic situation that we're living right now.
Mm-hmm. And the Pentagon says the military campaign against Iran cost approximately $37.5 billion. Now, looking beyond the financial figure, what political and strategic return does Washington believe it's achieved?
Oh, that's a very good question, and that's a very good analysis to do. Right now, nobody in the United States believe, probably, even not the government, probably they're talking about, they are pretty convinced that they are winning this war. But right now, the situation is, at best, we can call it a stalemate, which means there is no real winner. And not being real winner, this happens what I don't remember now who said that. I think it was Kissinger who said that for the guerrilla, if they win, they win. And if they don't win, that's another victory. For the United States, that's not the case. If they win, of course they win. But if they and in any other result, they're gonna lose, and they're gonna be perceived as losers, and the main losers of this battle. So Iran not losing is just not losing. This is stalemate for them. They can consider it as a victory, and that's a luxury that the United States can't afford. So they're pushing and they're putting a lot of money in this defense because they decided months ago to get into this struggle, to get into this war, and right now there is no other exit that can convince the American public that just pretty obvious winning. So the situation for that winning, you need to apply. If you apply the what was called the Powell Doctrine, probably you're gonna overpower. You're gonna have to overpower the enemy in a ratio that 10-1, and that means lots and lots of money. So, as I said before, the situation right now is in a stalemate, and the last stalemates that we can consider in American history, in the wars they've been having, probably was Iraq, not Afghanistan, which I can consider that a defeat. Korea, not Vietnam, that we can consider that as a defeat. So the situation is pretty critical for the self-consciousness of the United States.
And the world's biggest concern remains the Strait of Hormuz here. If Iran were again to threaten maritime traffic, would Washington be bound to respond militarily again? Or how credible is Trump's military threat here?
Here, we have to see this because we're in a pretty nice, I don't want to say nice and a beautiful situation, but a very pretty interesting situation here that we are watching right now in the Hormuz Strait, because two Chinese tankers, they're going to be pretty soon in Bab el-Mandab, the Strait of Bab el-Mandab, and the Houthis are trying to control that strait. And whatever it happens with these two tankers, with these two Chinese tankers, is going to be a pretty clear, very bright signal in a very good clue for what the Houthis and the Iranians are willing to do in order to keep the strait under control. Of course, right now the strait is the main piece of battle, is the main piece of discord in this situation, in this war. The United States need urgently to control that strait, which means that there is not gonna be a long run for trying to figure out who's gonna control the strait.
Enrique, another point key to note here, President Trump's now simultaneously pursuing diplomacy through a proposed civilian nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia. How important would such a deal be for the regional balance of power? What's your assessment there?
Here is not just a question of nuclear power. Here is a question of the eternal war that Shiites and Sufis are struggling for a very, very long time. Right now, Saudi Arabia, they don't, and other, I said Sufis, Sunnis, sorry, and other countries with the same branch of Muslims, they are gonna try to neutralize Iran, and any help in order to do that, and any help in order to be the predominant branch in the region is gonna be welcomed by Saudi Arabia more. more to the point of that, considering that Iran is attacking United States interest in those countries. But anyway, that soil is being attacked. So the Saudis and the Emirates and all those countries, they're gonna try to be as much to receive as much protection as they can from the United States. So any deal, any treat, any sort of agreement in order to reinforce and in order to increase the perception of being powerful by those countries and being protected by those countries is gonna, as I said, it's gonna be welcome. So it's not a question of nuclear power. It's a question of it's a more ancestral question that's just nuclear power.
Okay, I want to bring Lebanon into the picture before we end the discussion. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam travelled to one of the villages recently vacated by Israeli forces, and he raised the Lebanese flag alongside the army's deployment. What do you think of that, and how symbolically important was the visit?
It is important because we know that conflict is taking for too long in intermittent ways and intermittent attacks and counterattacks. But here for Israel, the important thing here is Hezbollah. It's not the Lebanese government. So if the Israel wants to negotiate, or they want to get an agreement with Lebanon, it's going to be fine. The problem is Hezbollah, and Israel is pretty good making distinctions between Hezbollah and the Lebanon government. So you can reach an agreement with Lebanon as a country, with Lebanon, with its government, but it doesn't mean that the struggle and the war and the battles against Hezbollah are gonna get an end, because they won't. So for Israel, who I consider is in war against Iran and their proxies since October the 7th, the situation is not gonna be ended with short of an agreement with the Lebanon government. So Lebanese government, sorry. So as I said before, those negotiations, they're fine, but the situation for Israel is give an end to Hezbollah, not to the government of Lebanon.
Okay. Enrique, looking at all these layers diplomatically, who appears to hold the initiative today? Is Washington shaping events, or are regional actors determining their own security arrangements more and more?
As I said before, whatever the negotiations are leading to, we don't have to consider a correlation in the field of war, because my point here, my stance here is that there is no connection between who is negotiating and who is in charge of the armed forces. Even amongst the armed forces, probably there is no connection in who is attacking what and who's trying to protect what. So the situation, I think, is completely, for Iran, I think, is completely clusterized. We were having recent signals from short of orders coming from Maktab Khamenei that I don't consider them serious, not even sent by Khamenei himself. So for me, that no linkage between who's negotiating and who's in charge of the armed forces is the key in this situation. That's the reason why the United States keep on trying to negotiate, and Donald Trump is saying that they are willing to negotiate, but the attacks keep on coming. So I think this situation needs a completely different approach. Probably the United States are on that, and the next days we're gonna see how the situation evolves.
Enrique, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Once again, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me too.
Hamas' newly elected leader is calling for renewed momentum in efforts to end the war in the Gaza Strip, urging mediators to advance negotiations while proposing broader political talks involving all Palestinians. The group's leader, Khalil al-Hayya, urges mediators to press for a transition to the second phase of US President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. In a televised address, he called for a national dialogue, including all Palestinians and full political partnership. Hayya was named Hamas leader on Monday, but talks involving the group, mediators and Trump's envoys have so far failed to reach a broader agreement to end the conflict.
Our first and clear priority is a complete cessation of the occupation's aggression, killing and terrorizing, and the achievement of a full withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. We're here, calling on the countries sponsoring the negotiation process to exert real pressure on the extremist right-wing occupation government to implement what has been agreed upon and to proceed with the transition to the next phase.
After the break, Russia's foreign minister warns his US counterpart over arms exports to Ukraine at the ASEAN summit in Manila. Stay with us on A News. Welcome back. You're watching A News. Russia says its forces have captured 2 more settlements in eastern and southern Ukraine in the Kharkiv and Zaporizhia regions. Moscow also says it struck Ukrainian military maritime facilities and intercepted 80 Ukrainian drones over the Black Sea and Sea of Azov and several Russian regions overnight. Ukraine, meanwhile, says it carried out long-range strikes inside Russia, targeting a logistics center supplying drone parts and navigation equipment to the Russian military. Ukrainian forces also struck Russian oil tankers and cargo ships in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has told US Secretary of State Marco Rubio that continued Western weapons deliveries to Ukraine are unacceptable to Moscow. The two met on the sidelines of ASEAN talks in Manila. The meeting lasted around 40 minutes and centered on efforts to end the war in Ukraine. According to Russian media, Lavrov reaffirmed Moscow's support for proposals discussed during the Alaska negotiations.
Okay, thank you, press. Thank you, guys.
The European Union's latest sanctions package against Russia has hit another hurdle, with Greece emerging as the main obstacle to agreement over new restrictions on Russian liquefied natural gas. Anita Sharma has the details.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the EU once again struggles to keep a united front on sanctions against Russia. EU ambassadors met in Brussels in a fresh attempt to approve the bloc's 21st sanctions package, but Greece remains the main obstacle. The proposed measures are aimed squarely at Russia's financial sector, targeting more than 200 entities, including nearly 100 financial institutions, in an effort to further isolate Moscow's banking system and make it harder for Russia to finance its war in Ukraine. The package also includes new energy measures. From the start of next year, the EU plans to stop importing Russian liquefied natural gas and will prohibit European companies from providing services to Russian LNG terminals that are majority owned by Russian entities. But Athens is now pushing back against restrictions on Russian liquefied natural gas that it had already agreed to earlier this year. Greece, home to one of the world's largest LNG shipping industries, argues the measures would do little to reduce Russia's energy revenues while handing business to non-European competitors. One Greek shipping company that transports LNG from Russia's Yamal project has also warned the sanctions would hurt Western operators more than Moscow. The dispute highlights the growing difficulty of maintaining unanimous support for sanctions more than 4 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Diplomats say the Commission is also proposing to keep the G7 price cap on Russian oil unchanged at $44.10 per barrel, after concerns that raising the cap could actually increase Russian revenues. Now, the EU hopes to reach a compromise before ministers break for the summer, but negotiations show that while support for Ukraine remains strong, agreement on how to increase pressure on Russia is becoming increasingly difficult. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Hungary's former Prime Minister has accused the country's new government of undermining democracy. Viktor Orban has called on supporters to oppose what he describes as an abuse of power by using peaceful means. Orban says Hungary has ceased to be a democratic state and is urging supporters to use all peaceful means to oppose the new government. His comments followed a raid on offices housing Fidesz servers as part of an investigation into alleged misappropriation at the National Culture Fund. Orban insists the raid was politically motivated and denies any wrongdoing, while prosecutors say it is linked to their criminal investigation. Indian Prime Minister has vowed to act against those behind exam paper leaks after days of public anger. The youth-led cockroach movement is still calling for Education Minister to be sacked over the scandal.
Fast-track courts will be set up to prosecute those behind exam paper leaks in India. That's according to Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday. However, protesters and opposition parties swiftly rejected Modi's proposal and insisted that Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan quit first, with opposition groups disrupting Parliament for the fourth day this week. The youth group known as the Cockroaches are calling for reforms to the examination system. They also want compensation for families of students who died by suicide after the scandals. The name came about after a senior judge referred to some unemployed young people as cockroaches during a court hearing. Opposition lawmakers have backed the movement, which began a few months ago.
We want the government to listen to the students' voices because the situation is way beyond the limits. Every Indian is upset, from farmers, environment to the youth of the country. Everyone is upset, and this government is not ready to listen or make reforms.
We have said this very clearly. What happened on 20th was a trailer. If the government doesn't agree, millions more will come to Delhi, because this time will not hold back, will not stay silent. We have seen too much, we have witnessed too much, we have experienced too much. 20th July ko the way the police behaved, we have seen it all now.
Protesters and police clashed briefly on the streets of New Delhi late on Wednesday, with officers firing tear gas and wielding canes to push them back. The demonstrations initially spread across university campuses before growing into large protests in the capital, the biggest youth challenge for Modi since he came to power in 2014. The immediate trigger was anger over leaked entrance exams for medical colleges and government jobs. When papers are leaked, exams are cancelled or repeated, leaving students facing months of uncertainty. Many young people now say they have lost trust in public institutions and are demanding greater government accountability.
And after the break, Germany's Chancellor Merz urges Armenia for further progress on peace talks with Azerbaijan. Welcome back. You're watching A News. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is urging Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan to take further steps toward a final peace agreement with Azerbaijan. During a high-level phone call, the German leader stressed that securing a treaty between Yerevan and Baku is critical for the stability of the South Caucasus. Berlin says the two leaders also weighed the regional fallout from the ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. The discussions wrapped up with a focus on expanding bilateral ties and pulling Armenia closer to the European Union. And joining me now is Dr. Tornike Shareshenidze, professor at GIPA, Tbilisi, Georgia. Dr. Tornike, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Now, Chancellor Friedrich Merz emphasized the importance of further progress in the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process. How do you read this, and what message do you think Berlin intended to send through this conversation?
Well, it's a two-way street, It doesn't depend solely on the Armenian side. It takes both the Armenian and Azerbaijani side, especially, I would say, official Baku, because Azerbaijan is a victor here. And hopefully, we in Georgia, we hope very much the peace agreement will be signed pretty soon, because we need peace in the region. We know the value of peace here in Georgia. And as for the personal involvement of Chancellor Merz, well, it looks to me, looks like German foreign policy, is becoming increasingly ambitious. It is not limited only by European Union or Ukraine, for that matter, but also now it includes the South Caucasus. Although I don't know how much Germany can influence things here in the South Caucasus, because there are some other players here involved, like, of course, Turkey, Russia, obviously, and the United States. And Germany has not played that significant role in the South Caucasus. Maybe France have, because France has backed Armenia already for decades, but not that much Germany. So let's see what's going to be Germany's next steps. I mean, it takes some specific, it takes some specific concrete steps, not just words,
Now, I know you mentioned foreign policy, but why is Germany paying closer attention now?
Once again, my explanation is that Chancellor Merz is quite ambitious, and he wants Germany to play a much bigger role than Germany used to. Germany's role has been limited somehow, in a post-World War II world, for obvious reasons, because ambitious Germany, was not taken so well by its neighbors in Europe, and now Germany has to have, let's say, overcome this past and wants to play a more active role. But once again, I repeat myself, I don't know how Germany can influence things here.
Okay. And the German government also linked discussions on Ukraine and the Middle East with developments in the South Caucasus. Why are these separate domains now being viewed together?
I don't see any direct link between the war in Ukraine and war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But thanks God, this war is over. I mean, war over Karabakh is over, thanks God. But nobody knows when the war in Ukraine is going to be over. So that's much more difficult issue, of course. And especially that it involves one of the major powers, great powers, Russia. So that's a very difficult issue, and Germany is directly affected by the war in Ukraine. Of course, it wasn't influenced, it was not by the war in Karabakh, Germany, but Ukraine is a different matter. And Germany obviously has its stake in the war in Ukraine. It has been helping Ukraine. Germany has started now the rearmament, and let's see where it leads.
Okay. And Doctor, has the South Caucasus become a more important strategic region for Europe as the wider geopolitical landscape continues to evolve?
It has, because now as Russia is busy in Ukraine, it's obvious that Azerbaijan has fallen out of the Russian sphere of influence. Now the European Union wants to repeat the same trick in Armenia, but it's going to be much more difficult with Azerbaijan. Is a different case. Azerbaijan is, let's say, much more self-sufficient than Armenia. It has its own energy sources, unlike Armenia. Armenia is too much dependent on Russia, economically in the first place. So it's understandable that the European Union wants to supplant now Russia in the South Caucasus, but it will take some, I would say, some concrete specific actions that will allow Armenia to not to cut economic ties with Russia. It's completely impossible, but at least to lessen its economic dependence on Russia. But I don't know what European Union can do about it. The thing is that Armenia's exports to Russia is about like billions of dollars, and plus Armenia is most of natural gas. Armenia imports most of natural gas from Russia, and there are no other alternatives for Armenia at the moment when it comes to natural gas. energy sources.
And from a European perspective, how important would a complete Azerbaijan-Armenia peace agreement be for wider regional security?
Well, it's in our interest in the first place. I mean, South Caucasian states. If Europeans are somehow able to help with this, let them do it. But it will take, first of all, of course, Baku and Yerevan to come to the peace agreement, because ceasefire agreement definitely is not sufficient.
Now, you mentioned this earlier, well, you touched on this, but the other countries that were actually closely involved in the peace track, both Azerbaijan and Armenia continue to engage with multiple international partners. How does Germany fit into the wider diplomatic picture alongside the EU, Turkey, Russia, and the United States?
The only way Germany can do it is to get involved here. And strictly speaking, simply putting it, Germany has to do something about, first of all, Germany is an economic power. It's a major economic powerhouse in the European Union. So if we want to lessen Armenia's economic dependence on Russia, then it is Germany that's supposed to do this trick. But how? Is Germany ready to, compensate for Armenia's losses that definitely Armenia is suffering now, as Russia has closed its market for Armenian agricultural goods? I don't know. Let's wait and see what Germany is going to do.
Okay, and Doctor, diplomatic support is one thing, but implementation is another. What practical steps are still needed before a lasting peace agreement can be achieved?
I don't see any other obstacles that remain there. It will take, now it takes the political will on behalf of Baku in the first place, because as far as I can see, Yerevan is ready to sign peace agreement. It could have, Yerevan would have signed peace agreement like a few years ago, not just a few weeks or months ago, but a few years ago. And first of all, it takes now official Baku.
And how important is sustained international encouragement at this stage, particularly as both governments continue negotiations on the remaining outstanding issues?
Well, I think that Azerbaijan is a strong player, and I don't think that Azerbaijan cares that much about the opinion in Berlin or in Brussels or in anywhere else, maybe except Ankara, because Turkey is a very close ally and partner. But at the same time, I think Azerbaijani leadership, I hope they understand that they have to close this chapter and sign peace agreement with Armenia. It's in their interest too, because they have won the war, and now status quo has to be. Now we need the status quo, not only de facto but de jure status quo.
Okay, so we see that Chancellor Merz is actually trying to have a more active diplomatic role, if you like, than previous years. Do you think that they will be able to have more influence in the region now? I know you said it's a matter of waiting to see what Germany can bring to the table, but how do you feel about Chancellor Merz and his attempts at this stage?
Once again, words, but talk, but walk. So far it's only talk. And if Germany wants to do something here in the South Caucasus, Germany has to be more actively involved. And involvement is, in the first place, I would say, involvement takes spending some money here, because the West should understand one very simple thing: as long as countries like Armenia and Georgia remain economically dependent on Russia, it's going to be mission impossible to bring those countries to the European Union. That's a simple and ugly truth. And I'm speaking from my experience now. Unfortunately, many officials and experts in the European Union hardly realize this simple truth that it's economy, and it matters much more than anything else.
Okay. Dr. Tornike, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your analysis today.
Thank you.
A wildfire in southwest Turkey has destroyed homes and forced residents to evacuate. Firefighters are continuing a major operation to contain the blaze in a mountainous area. 2 houses burned and 80 people were evacuated to safety as the flames approached homes in the sparsely populated Fethiye district. Afad says 14 helicopters, 5 planes, 53 fire trucks and 380 personnel worked to contain the blaze. The fire broke out around noon on Wednesday, with helicopters battling the flames from the air and firefighters continuing efforts on the ground into the evening. Turkey and Syria have pledged to increase bilateral trade volumes to $10 billion as economic ties between the two neighbours continue to deepen. The push comes as Ankara seeks to position Turkish businesses in the post-Assad Syria's economic recovery. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Turkish Trade Minister Ömer Bolat says Turkey and Syria aim to increase bilateral trade to $10 billion as quickly as possible, as economic ties between the two neighbors continue to deepen. Bolat made the announcement after meeting Kutayba Bedoui, head of Syria's customs authority, on the sidelines of a trade and investment forum held at the Turkish Trade Ministry in Ankara. According to Bolat, bilateral trade reached a record $3.7 billion last year. The meeting reportedly focused on easing customs procedures, reviewing tariffs, accelerating work by a joint customs committee, and improving cooperation at border crossings. Ankara also wants to expand commercial activity across the entire Turkey-Syria border, with particular emphasis on the Gaziantep-Aleppo corridor, historically one of the region's most important trade routes. The push comes as Turkey seeks to play a leading role in Syria's economic recovery and reconstruction after years of conflict and political instability. Since the end of Assad's rule in late 2024, trade ties between the two countries have expanded rapidly, with steadily increasing border commerce, logistics, and investment activity. Turkish firms are also positioning themselves to take part in infrastructure, manufacturing, and energy projects in Syria as the latter looks to rebuild its shattered economy. For Ankara, closer economic integration is also viewed as a means of supporting regional stability and improving living conditions on both sides of the border. Bolat said that Turkey was working closely with the Syrian authorities to remove long-standing obstacles to trade and unlock what Ankara sees as significant untapped commercial potential. Reaching the $10 billion target would represent a major acceleration of bilateral economic ties and further cement Turkey's role as one of Syria's key trading partners. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Meanwhile, Azerbaijan exported more than 418 million cubic meters of natural gas to Syria in the first 5 months of this year. According to the Azerbaijan State Statistics Committee, the value stood at around $140.7 million. Overall, Azerbaijan exported more than 10 billion cubic meters of natural gas worth more than $3 billion to 8 countries between January and May. The total export volume was slightly higher than the same period last year, increasing by about 110 million cubic meters. China says demand in its shipbuilding industry has continued to lead the global market in the first half of 2026. That's according to data released by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology on Thursday. Green and low-carbon vessels have emerged as a key growth area for the country's industry. In the first half of this year, the country's shipbuilding completion volume reached 36.5 million deadweight tonnes, up 51.2% year-on-year. Afghanistan and Uzbekistan have discussed advancing a major railway project aimed at strengthening regional trade and connectivity. The proposed Afghan Trans Railway would connect Uzbekistan with Pakistan through Afghanistan, creating a new regional trade and transit corridor. Our correspondent in Kabul has more.
Afghanistan and Uzbekistan are seeking to accelerate railway cooperation, with talks focusing on the Afghan Trans Railway project and increased movement of commercial goods between the two countries. Afghanistan's Deputy Minister for Railways at the Ministry of Public Works, Muhammad Ishaq Sahibzada, travelled to Uzbekistan at the head of a technical delegation where he met Uzbekistan's Director General for Railways. According to Afghanistan's Ministry of Public Works, the discussions focused on launching feasibility studies for the Afghan Trans Railway, which is expected to connect Uzbekistan with Pakistan through Afghan territory. The two sides had also discussed transferring the Herat Mazar Sharif railway survey documents to Kabul, developing branch lines and increasing rail freight transportation. The ministry said both sides emphasized the need to strengthen bilateral railway cooperation, expand trade links and provide greater facilities for traders and investors. The Afghan Trans Railway is a major regional project that would connect Central Asia with Pakistani ports through Afghanistan. However, feasibility studies, funding and coordination among the participating countries are still needed before construction can begin. The latest discussions come as Afghanistan seeks to expand its railway network and strengthen trade and transit connections with Central Asia and other regional markets. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, iNews.
Turkmenistan has launched its inaugural pilot electronic system, the ETIR, for cargo operations, digitalizing trade along the Central Asia-Caspian transport corridor. The initiative brings together Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan to streamline customs procedures and speed up cross-border freight movement. Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
The Turkmenbashi International Seaport has begun a pilot for cargo transport operations using the electronic ETIR system on the Azerbaijan-Turkmenistan-Uzbekistan road. The sim is running from 22nd to 24th of July and is being conducted with support from the United Nations Economic Commission for Euro. Training and coordination for customs officials was with International Road Transport Union and the UN Conference on Trade and Development. This new system replaces traditional paper-based T-carnets with digital customs data, allowing authorities to exchange transit information electronically. The first shipment under the pilot has already traveled from Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan across the Caspian Sea. It will continue to Turkmenistan before moving along the corridor, which carries a wide range of cargo, including agricultural products, textiles, industrial goods, and containerized freight. This road is therefore becoming an increasingly important trade link between Central Asia and European markets. Officials also plan to introduce electronic CMR transport documents, further digitalizing freight operations. Azerbaijan has already implemented electronic permit exchange with Turkey, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, as regional partners continue efforts to modernize logistics and strengthen trade connectivity across Central Asia and Caspian region. It is Sevil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A-News.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A-News for all the latest updates.